We want to know about the changes that the House has done to our version of S62. So if you could pull that up, it'd be great. And I realize it's not final in the House yet, but I don't think that any of the other committees are looking at the S62 and the CTE provisions that the Commerce Committee put in.
Um, just one second. I'm living in a zoo.
Okay, I have the same.
Sorry.
I don't think I see animals.
Wild cows. So would you like me to pull this up on the screen?
I would.
Okay.
So did you send it to Amy to post?
It did indeed.
And Peggy just posted it on your page.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So hopefully, good morning, David Hall, Legislative Council. I should be hopefully screening S62 draft 3.1. This is your version of S62 with House Commerce proposed changes and additions. And I know obviously at this point, S10 has been added to this and you've been talking about that with Damien. I have not done any further work on this for any other House committee, but I cannot tell you, obviously what the status of it is. I haven't heard anything further about it, but that doesn't mean it's not going to change, given that it's in House appropriations. And one of the House additions, the piece on the adult CTE, does have money in this bill. So I'm not sure how they're going to reconcile, this and the budget. They'll figure it out, but I have not heard anything further.
One question on that, David, is this version has been voted by House Commerce, and it is before the Appropriations Committee now. So if they wanted to agree to it, they could agree to it. If they wanted to pull the money and put it into the big bill, they could do that. But it's formally, the suggested changes by Commerce are before the House Appropriations Committee, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So your section 1 is unchanged. The intent and the purpose about expanding the workforce, attracting new residents, and providing support to employers who are unable to fill positions from Vermont candidates. That's all still the underlying intent as far as the House is concerned. The changes in the program that you are creating, codifying, are there's 3 that are significant. I mean, one, obviously, throughout, the concept of a remote worker is gone. The grant amounts in B are the same. The residency of the employee is what determines that, and that is consistent with how it left. Senate subsection C is the same. It's just basically the administration, and D, the report. So the changes really come here in E. You'll remember that when it left your committee in the Senate, it had sort of 2 different pots of qualifying expenses. The first was what you see here, the actual cost for relocation, and that's all your language verbatim. But what is removed is expenses based on the nature of the employee's position for broadband or membership in a co-working space. And you remember that actually applied to all relocating employees, not just remote workers. So that's a change. For relocating employee, it's an individual, again, after July becomes a resident. But the rest of this is all changed. And it's not just that remote workers are removed. There are other changes. So the first one is that they specify it could be an employee of a nonprofit business organization and also a state, municipal, or other public sector employer. So your language just said Vermont location of a for-profit business, and they have added, I think it already included a nonprofit, but they wanted to say it, and then they specifically added a public sector employer.
Okay.
You still have the attestation that you couldn't fill the job with a Vermont applicant. So in that respect, it's still a new relocating employee. The other changes here, and that is, what we sort of been referring to as the wage threshold. What's the minimum amount of money that the position needs to pay to count? And it had been, you'll remember, either 160% of the minimum wage or 140%, depending on where the employer was located. And this changes it so that any position, regardless of location, has to at least pay the livable wage rate calculated pursuant to 2 VSA 526. That is the legislative charge to the Joint Fiscal Office to come up with the livable wage and the basic needs budget, all that stuff in their report. And if you can find that report, it's available on the Joint Fiscal webpage. I can send it to you if you need it, but that's basically, I believe it's $13.39 per hour for the upcoming year. So that is a change.
So 140, what is the, it was 140% of the minimum wage, which is going to like $12.50 next year. So 40% of $12.50 is like $5 more, $17.50 versus $13.39. Does the livable wage include any benefits, or both our version and this version are exclusive of benefits?
Neither version ever contemplated the value of the benefits.
Okay.
I mean, the
This
livable.
is a big drop then. Well, you don't have to opine on that, but it goes from $17 and something for 140% of minimum wage. I think I've got that right. To higher at 160% down to $13.39. This was, I think, something.
I don't know where
in some ways, I think this is something that the administration was urging us to do, and we rejected. They wanted us to lower the threshold to get lower income folks
Right.
to be qualifying here.
Joan made a big pitch for cashiers, as I recall. I mean, for retail, that there was a need for that too. David, we calculate, JFO calculates the basic wage, or the basic livable wage, but whose version of the Vermont livable wage? Because the livable wage is actually done by county, and is, I don't know who
there is an average.
There is, because a JFO only stands behind the basic minimum wage, the basic livable, whatever they call it, which is much lower than the livable wage, actually. Whose definition of the Vermont livable wage are we living with here?
So that statutory piece charges the Joint Fiscal Office, the Joint Fiscal Committee, to come up with that number. So are you seeing it on your screen right now, 1339? So this is from the current report.
But that isn't the livable wage. That is their basic, that's JFO's basic wage, or whatever.
Basic needs budget.
Basic needs budget. That is not a livable wage. The livable wage in Windsor County is something like $19 an hour. I mean,
Well,
so I have a real problem.
We don't want to get into, we need to get
Right.
clarification, because you're saying it's not, but I'm reading it in black and white that it is. And
Yeah, but
this is
look
a
under,
report-
it says basic needs budget.
It
And
says
there-
1/2 of the basic needs budget. So the livable wage rate, they are just calculating a 2-person household. 1/2 of it is the livable wage rate, apparently.
Right, but you're arguing, I mean, the House has said that they want to open this up to people who are making the Vermont livable wage as defined in that statute. I'm reading this as defined, David, you could correct me if I'm wrong, as defined in that statute, the Vermont livable wage is $13.39. So that's what I think the House wanted to do. And that was their goal. And I think they've achieved it by the language they put there. You can argue as long as you want that that's not the livable wage, but I see it right in front of me that it is the livable wage.
Well,
And
the question is, do we concur with that?
Right.
And I suggest that I certainly do not concur with it. As a reporter of the bill, my principal argument for doing this was that this is the rare program that gives us a return on investment based on what we spend and what we get back. And to lower it to this, we will not get that back.
Right.
Right. So I believe, if you take 1175, which is the current minimum wage, and you multiply it by the 140%, it's $16.45. And I remember asking, would it make sense to say basic needs budget instead? And whoever was with us, not Ledge Council, said they're about the same. So that's concerning because they're not the same. One's 1339 and one's 1645.
Exactly.
Okay, time out. The law presently is 140% of the minimum wage
Right.
in counties other than basically Chittenden County. In Chittenden County, it's 160% of the minimum wage. That's existing law. That's what we sent. We didn't change that, I don't think, in our version. They're suggesting lowering it significantly, especially, well, I guess that 1339 will go up by the same percentage as our numbers would go up based upon the minimum wage. But it's a few dollars, even in lower income counties, it's a few dollars less than what we passed. That's the whole argument.
Mhm.
I don't think we need to start changing what we put in there. I mean, if we go to get into negotiations and this becomes a sticking point, maybe there's some sort of middle ground, but this is existing law. I don't know why we would be changing existing.
So I didn't
Senator
mean to.
Brock probably would have argued if we're going to change existing law, if anything, we should have raised it more. So, anyhow, it's an issue that we've
It
identified.
is, and
Let's-
we need
let's
to
keep-
define it better in the future.
Can I just say 125% of minimum wage is $14.68, which is kind of in between the two.
Go too low.
Right. I mean, if this becomes an issue of stalemate, then, maybe there is some opportunity. I don't even know their reasons why. We spoke to them last night and we didn't get into that level of detail. It just mostly focused on money issues and not wording issues at this point. And so I don't know if they just decided that they just went with the administration, said we need cashiers and why wouldn't we lower this? Anyhow, let me get back to where I was. So David, can you soldier on?
Sure. So obviously, the definition, the rest of the definition about qualifying workers is removed, or whatever the term is. What do we say is relocating employee no longer includes remote work.
Right.
So this does, still repeal the session law programs. Those would continue to exist through July the 1st, and then they would disappear, which, you may or may not want to do. And And then that's really it for the adult, for the relocating worker piece, the new relocating employee piece.
Okay.
Do you want to move ahead? Or are you guys done with that
Yes.
one?
Yeah, let's move
Okay.
ahead.
So this is pretty simple. Sure.
And a
I
Rom,
I had a question about the small change before. It's not something that I feel like is worth changing the whole bill for, but once I go through all of those nonprofit, for-profit, state, municipal, or other public sector, does that glaringly leave somebody out? Like, are we gonna get an email later that says, I can't believe you left out this sector? Or is that pretty much every type of employer at this point?
I think that is everybody.
It's
Okay.
pretty comprehensive.
Okay. Then I'm fine. I just didn't know if we're like specifically leaving someone out at that point. So,
I think you
how
got
about
it.
it? How about a church group?
They're nonprofits.
Okay, that's true, probably, yeah.
They're
Okay,
all nonprofits.
okay.
All right. So adult CTE investments, these are ARPA funds. And there are three sort of different allocations here. So the first one is career and tech ed adult training scholarships. So this is $100,000 to VSAC for adult training scholarships. That's not more than $1,000 in tuition support, students enrolled in workforce development programs at adult career and tech ed centers. You can use that for standalone grants or supplement grants through VSAC advancement, and eligible students may be nominated by a VSAC outreach counselor or a caseworker from VDOL. That's it. And this is all there's ever been.
Is any of this stuff in the budget anywhere at this point?
No, not, I mean, there's a budget that passed the House, a budget that passed the Senate. There's, who knows what version they're on now in a conference budget. So I can't answer the conference budget question, but this was never included in the House budget, and it's certainly not in the Senate budget. This is
Okay.
freestanding ARPA funding.
This, and my recollection is part of this, and Senator Clarkson's our expert on this area. Isn't this the Hal Cohn, Amy Schollenberger?
Yes,
That they testified that they had tried to reach out to the Department of Education and they had needs here and it wasn't. And
Yeah.
Jeff somebody wrote us a letter.
Jay Ramsey.
Jay Ramsey, right? Okay.
Right.
So this is just go back a second. I just want to understand this. Maybe you can explain it a little better to us. The $100,000 to VSAC. This is a brand new scholarship program.
I mean, VSAC already has the advancement grant. I mean, they've had that for many years, and that's the thing that allows, students to buy books and supplies and bus tickets and whatever else. And this is just supplementing, or it could be standalone, but it could be tied to the advancement grant as an enhancement.
Okay, so let's assume it's not tied, it's independent, and I get $1,000 grant under this. Is that a check to me as a student, or is there another payee, or does it have to be used for something at the adult at CTE center?
That's my understanding. But I mean, these words are the only words I have.
So
So is it a credit at the,
CTE's, I'm not familiar with this. So CTE centers charge people money to attend?
they do for the adult program, is my understanding. But
Okay.
I need to be refreshed on this. I have to admit right now, my brain, I don't,
So
I-
essentially what
what
we're doing, that we're standing up a new scholarship program. Some of it could be used for the advancement grants, but if it's used mostly for this new program, then we're helping people afford adult CTE that they
Correct.
might not otherwise could afford. Okay,
Right. It's sort of
Alright.
like what we were talking about with Sarah Buxton in the reimbursing people for their, for their additional expenses, which enable which enable the education.
okay. Number 2,
Number 2, career and technical education equipment purchasing. So this is $150,000, but it goes to the Agency of Education. And the agency would award grants up to $20,000 to the adult CTE centers to purchase equipment needed to launch or sustain workforce development programs in high growth, high need sectors. B, the agency shall collaborate with the Adult Tech Ed Association and DOL to create a competitive grant program. That's it.
okay,
And then the third allocation.
this is all one-time money, general fund in FY22, I take it.
These are ARPA funds.
Oh, they are opera funds in
Yes,
FY22, I assume, right?
yes.
Okay,
And then CTE program development and instruction. So it's another $150,000 also to the Agency of Education to provide adult CTE coordinators with access to curriculum development experts, build local programs that are needed to address local or regional workforce development needs. And the agency has to collaborate with, again, the Adult Tech Ed Association and DOL to make these awards not more than $20,000.
seems pretty vague to me. $150,000 to AOE to provide adult CTE coordinators. Oh, okay. So it's for curriculum development experts. I don't know if you heard any testimony. I mean, do we need to have curriculum development experts in 15 regions of the state? Can't we have one curriculum development expert put together a couple of paradigms of what it looks like, as opposed to giving out grants and hiring a consultant in every, I don't even know how many CTEs there are, coordinators there are, but do you know, Allison, how many adult CTE coordinators there are in the state?
No, they're not that many, and they aren't all full time, and some CTE centers don't even have them anymore. I'd need an update on that. I think it's money. Yeah, I'd need an update on
So
that.
David, you don't have that information, I take it.
I'm
So but
sorry,
if I look at this,
have
and let's
any
say the
idea.
average grant is $10,000, that would allow for 15 grants. And I'm hearing that we may not even have 15 CTE coordinators out there. So,
Yeah, I just don't know. I don't have an update on that, but I know it's been an issue, and I know they're part-time in some CTE centers. They don't exist in some CTE centers, and in some they're robust. So we'd need an update on that.
yeah. Could you try and have a conversation with Sarah Buxton this evening? Do you have any time for that? I mean, just to
I think that AOE is a better
okay,
shot
well,
on
yeah.
this.
or yeah, I don't know who to talk to,
Because,
but it just strikes me that if we agree with the money, it's a lot
This
of
is
money.
$400,000.
A lot of money for curriculum development, it seems to me.
So the question I have is this accounted for elsewhere in the budget and not in economic? I mean, is this accounted for in ESSER money or in, is
No.
this?
Well, I don't know about ESSER money. It's not in the House or the Senate version of the budget.
I understand that,
now.
but is
But
it
I think-
elsewhere?
What's that?
Is it, is it elsewhere in the budget other than economic development is, I guess, my question.
No, I don't think it is in the House passed budget or the Senate passed budget. I think this is brand new, and I think it came, if you recall, Hal Cohen and those folks said they
Yeah.
tried to get this proposal before the AOE, and they came to us in a last ditch effort because they couldn't get any attention or they
Traction.
missed it in the House. So they apparently went back to the House, and the House has now said they want to put this in. If it's ARPA money, you know, who knows what's in that stew at this point over in the in terms of the conference committee. So I don't think this is impossible to do, but it's a new ask by the House Commerce Committee. I'm not sure we've given it, well, I know we haven't given it complete due diligence. I know that I think we were sympathetic to the plea, but it came so late in time and we had so many restrictions on what we could do at that point that it fell by the wayside for us. That's all I know. But in terms of the merits of this, I'm a little less than clear. I guess we can pull up Jay's email. We can try and dig that out and send it to the committee and talk some more.
Yeah, let me see if I can
about
even find it.
About that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We haven't had an opportunity in this committee to discuss the memo compilation, whatever you want to call it, of the new ARPA guidance that came out last Monday, and certainly haven't had the opportunity to go through, you know, different funding streams tied to that.
Right.
I just want to say, you know, for the record, as your attorney, I think probably number one here, the scholarships won't be hard to show probably that is ARPA eligible because there's a lot of language that's permissive and generous around training. I would probably want to raise a flag on the other two pieces, buying equipment and then developing new curricula. I mean, I'd have to look back at it, but my gut is that those are questionable uses of ARPA funds.
Okay, so just a brief update for the committee on Senator Clarkson and myself's conversations last night with Representative Marcotte and Kimball. They informed us early on in the conversation that this, obviously, everybody knows this is a very difficult budgetary walk to walk with all the committees involved and all the guidance and changes that keep happening. But they told us that that your memo, David, and I've read the yellow portions of your memo, call into question a bunch of things in the not directly, but reading between the lines of a lot of the negotiations we've been having with the suggestions of recommendations we've made to appropriations and what we were about to embark upon trying to wrap up 159 to see if we could reach agreement. So this is almost at this point in time to reach agreement with the House on all the various elements that are in H159, which this CTE, by the way, is, they're also suggesting perhaps could go into 159 or stay here, is very confusing. So what we're proposing to do, and I think we have agreement, is we're just going to tell the appropriators what we think the right amount of money and the right programs we should suggest for enacting, and then let them decide the funding sources, whether that causes all kinds of complications of what we can do. But we've just sort of set forward our priorities within the total budgetary limits that Senator Kitchell has given us. The vast majority of it is ARPA funds. If that runs afoul of ARPA, then they have to decide whether they're going to use one-time general funds or walk away from the thing. But we can't do much better at this point, other than to give them our list, which is essentially a negotiated list from what we straw voted on 159 before. And that negotiations is still a work in progress, and obviously the committee will get to weigh in on those before we make any final decisions. But I don't know, David, if it's worthwhile to sort of highlight the ARPA guidelines in terms of the items that were in 159 as the House voted it versus the 159 as we straw polled it. There's only like 6 or 7 money issues in 159. Some of it's language issues, some of it's off budget, but there are things like better places, remote workers, marketing and tourism. I mean, if the committee wants to go through and have David do a side by side as his concerns on any of those, we can. But my strategy at this point is just to not pay attention as much to the source of fund. It's mostly all ARPA on the Senate side, and just say, here's what we still want to do, and if that would get the House to agree, then the appropriators have to make the final decision where they can fund those things from. It's probably as clear as mud to people, but David probably follows that. If you want to just jump, I mean, there really are only 6 or 7 things in 159 that are ARPA funds. Are there any that jump out at you as clearly not eligible for ARPA funding that the Senate passed budget, in your opinion, has funded with ARPA and may be squirrely?
I'm always gonna hesitate to say clearly this
Okay.
isn't allowed. I don't, it's all just like under the CARES Act, it's all along that sort of spectrum of risk. This one is closer to the end of being a problem. This one's closer to the end of probably being fine. A lot of it's right in the middle. I think what's important too, though, is that, it's going to depend on the implementation as much as the language, right? I mean, the agencies are going to have the responsibility as well. If projects are ARPA funded, they're going to have to screen either the whole project or that portion of a project that is funded with ARPA funds to make sure it complies, because the onus is on the state, right, to implement the program, to dole out the money, to maintain the records, to require, adequate data from the recipients on how they use the money. And then it's during the ARPA timeframe, we're responsible for that. Or if it's money going directly to a subordinate level of government, then they have to be responsible for it. And then in the end, we have, the possibility, whatever it looks like, of inspections or audits or show us your records or whatever. And then, recoupment if there were ever a determination that something was not eligible. So it's sort of that same thing we went through with the CARES Act, that, the state's on the hook and needs to make sure that this works. So I think your idea is a fine one. If you guys would like me to look at, quickly go through 159.
Yeah, let me try and make it easier for you.
Yep.
I have the list of 159 issues, and you can.
Sure.
I know you're not going to be able to comment to absolute, but
Sure.
in your continuum, how much, do you think it probably could go through, or
Sure.
you could probably won't go through? So the first one is tourism and marketing.
Yeah, I think that one is in pretty safe space. The guidance, the rule, and the statute itself, the act itself, really hammer home and cite specific percentage drops in revenue suffered in the sectors of tourism, hospitality, etc. it is one of the things that are specifically called out as needing assistance from states and local governments. And in fact, when they measure what kind of assistance you might give to other sectors, they are pegging tourism and hospitality sort of as the benchmark of what the pain looks like.
Right.
So I think this is probably just in really good shape.
Okay. Technology-based economic development, 800,000 to help with the SBIR and other grants. How
Sure.
about that first 800,000?
So this is going to be one of those where it will hinge on the agency screening the applicant and the project and the need and then the funding. I mean, the act and the guidance and the interim final rule at this point are very clear that the use of this money has to be in response to the negative harm caused by COVID or the economic fallout, and it has to be proportionate to that harm, and it has to directly address the harm in sort of size and scope, both qualitative and quantitative. So to the extent a business comes to the agency and can demonstrate, it suffered economic harm due to COVID and that this grant will help it address that economic harm, if that manifests as a matching grant for SBIR, great, but what I feel pretty confident saying we can't do is just say, we've got a lot of money to give and let's help businesses pursue those federal grants that they were going to pursue anyway. And now we have the ability to give them a little extra on the state side because we have a pot of money for matching grants. That's not going to work. They're going to have to go through the same analysis for these businesses as all the other ones, which is what was your COVID related harm and how are we addressing it with this money?
My guess is that, we spent a lot of time in our version of H-159 putting up guardrails and eligibility criteria for a lot of these programs. I don't know if we changed the words here in this one or not, but we did in other sections. My guess is that the appropriators will have some sort of blanket statement on the ARPA funds to say, to the extent it's not already said in the individual sections, the implementers will have to do what David has said to make sure they keep it within the guardrails of ARPA. What
I
about the
have more
one?
hesitancy in this section on the UVM Office of
Well, that's what
Engagement side of things.
I was going to that next.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump
Oh, that's
ahead of you.
okay. So $1 million for UVM, Office of Engagement for general support, yada, yada, yada.
So you guys did add in the language that it has to respond to businesses that have suffered harm, and the purpose of that money is, it says, to over a 2-year period leverage the research services and data science capabilities of UVM to provide that kind of assistance. Same thing. What gives me a little bit of heartburn is on the House side of that language. It said in their budget, I think they would use that money to help finish setting up the Office of Engagement.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, is more of a stretch than providing assistance to a business. If UVM, as the recipient, has suffered a COVID-related harm and needs that money to finish setting up the Office of Engagement, for some reason that was experienced a setback because of COVID, maybe. If it's just, here, we can help you finish doing whatever you need to do because now we have money, less safe.
Okay, I'm jumping ahead to Better Places.
Yeah, I thought about this one pretty closely. Some of the language that I sent you where the highlights are had me thinking about how it could be some of these projects and it could be some part of some of these projects that would qualify, because you can spend this money to improve public facilities for better air quality and improvement, make things safer for people, disinfecting, building up space. But, things like, putting in new sidewalks, definitely not.
What about-
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, what about, a lot of this is, I mean, a lot was talked about like pocket parks.
Right.
Is that like a sidewalk essentially?
So,
No, sorry, pocket parks could very much be used as a COVID related because it gives people more space to, you know, you could make an argument that it was creating a healthier, safer distancing gathering place.
well, I agree with that, and that's the argument that I would make. The counter argument I would make is that, you know, that wasn't caused by COVID, and a nonprofit that's getting money to do it, or a municipality that's getting money to do it, it's not necessarily responding to harm caused by. And you know what gives me a little bit more pause too is that there's a part at the end of the interim final rule and then the supplementary guidance that says, you know, we will fund infrastructure projects, specifically calling out wastewater, drinking water, and broadband. And you have carte blanche, basically. It's very broad to go and do those types of infrastructure. Other type of infrastructure, just general infrastructure projects, don't qualify unless you can get them in through some other stream. So I agree with you. And there's also the piece that says that, you know, you could use the ARPA funds to help business districts that have been closed, to try to support businesses and restaurants that have been out. So I think in Montpelier, if you've ever seen the outdoor seating, probably that's the kind of thing that definitely would qualify. Maybe a pocket park. But you know, to like make everything look a whole lot nicer and buy the flowers and new lamp posts, the kind of things that revitalize public spaces, unless it's got a COVID related need and you're responding proportionally to that, that's where the agency is really going to have to make sure that, again, either the project itself or the part of the project that they use ARPA funds for qualifies.
So
What
that
about-
may be an
what about-
argument for less money this year in Better Places. I hate to say it, but it may be because there certainly was harm done to downtowns, to communities, and to businesses in the downtown, which some of these Better Places enable gathering in a safer way. So I think you could probably make that argument and have a pretty solid leg to stand on. But it would argue for maybe less on Better Places this year.
So David,
The ARPA
what
challenge.
about like arts events and festivals under Better Places?
I don't
So
think.
like, maybe you could use some portion of the money to make those safer? You know what I mean? I don't think you could just hand them a grant and say, here, have an arts festival because it'll revitalize our downtown. But maybe you could say, you've been holding an arts festival every June for the past 10 years. And now because of COVID, we've got to use more space, spread the tables out, have cleaning, better fans. I don't know what, you know, again, there could be a part of it that's okay. It depends on how they use the money.
Right. And it depends on how vigilant the agency is, the department is on promoting that aspect of it as a key element for the applications.
Okay, how about workforce development, micro businesses?
Yeah, I think those are really good uses, not good, safe uses of ARPA funds
right.
because they're targeted to lower income communities.
Right.
And the ARPA legislation and then the interim final rule just are really generous in funding. There's a presumption that it is okay to use money to help lower income populations and populations that are disproportionately impacted by COVID. So, and that can include the gamut of assistance from, you know, housing and mortgage, utilities, rent, education, direct cash payments, childcare benefits, affordable housing. I mean, if it's targeted to help lower income populations, you are pretty much in really good shape.
So I assume the BIPOC thing would probably be just as safe.
I think so.
Okay.
Because communities of color have suffered a disproportionate impact of COVID, and
Right.
under the rule, that is again, sort of a presumption that the use of those monies is therefore in response to COVID.
So can I just,
Yes,
well, I'm losing track a little bit of like the side by side comparison. I don't know if I should look at a particular document, but from what I'm hearing, I don't know if this is agreeing with Senator Clarkson, but I'd rather put more resources into things that help the most impacted communities than the downtowns. So I don't know if they had
So-
more money for better places and less for this, but
right. So we're, the areas of disagreement between the House and the Senate are not great here. This is one area where they agree with us. I'm just trying to deal with the
Okay.
ARPA funding question, whether this is permissible. They've already agreed to our higher figure. at least.
okay, great.
Yeah.
But we still have a question around the better places
Oh, we have
money.
a bunch of questions, yeah, but
Okay.
that's, yeah. But
Yeah.
I'm not trying to talk about the negotiations about what the dollar figure is. I just giving a quick run through by David
Okay,
as to whether, despite the fact that we're not really focused on ARPA versus general fund and what's allowable, I thought
Yep.
it'd be good to educate us very briefly on each one of these. So the next one is remote worker, relocated worker.
This one is really hard. The guidance says that if you read the parts that are in there, you saw where it discusses how this problem has to be caused or exacerbated by COVID-19 and the negative economic consequences. And if you're going to provide assistance, you also have to analyze. It's incumbent on the states to analyze and document why something was caused by COVID, and they have to consider that it wasn't caused by something else. So the question becomes, what is the problem that we're trying to address? And that is, well, we don't have enough employees, right? We don't have enough people who can fill the jobs. Was that caused by COVID? That was already pre-existing, but it was exacerbated by COVID.
It was definitely exacerbated by COVID.
So, but the question is, do we need to, while we can spend money to help businesses, we can spend money to help individuals, but can you spend ARPA funds to help people move to Vermont? Do you know what I mean? Is that a COVID related cause? And then is that a proportional and responsive use of monies related to that COVID related cause? I don't know. This one for me is a toss up and I don't know the answer.
And we haven't made it an aspect of the eligibility, which is your concern about COVID and future pandemics coming to Vermont. I mean, we haven't made that a piece of the eligibility.
Right. And like I said, if that helps, I wouldn't be surprised to see there be some sort of overlay by the Appropriations Committee on all of this stuff to say, in implementing this, you have to screen for relationship before you give any money out. The people have to be somehow connected to COVID. But let's move on. The next one is the CTE. Did we talk about that already in terms of ARPA?
I thought David said that education for,
The tuition assistance, yes. The other two you had questions about, right?
Yes.
Okay. How about capital projects grants, the 22 million, 11 million?
the
Yeah,
capital
again,
investment.
So here's what gives me pause on that one is that, a lot of the testimony has sounded like this. We have projects that are already sort of in the pipeline. Some of them may already be permitted or in the stages of permitting and approval. They've been discussing with regional stakeholders. What they need is this last little bit of money to push them over the line and to make sure that they happen, right? So my question becomes there, how is that caused by COVID, right? I mean, if it's supposed to be a transformational regional project. So ostensibly there's some major employer or business in the region that is just waiting to put all the final pieces together and then go. And can you draw the line from COVID and causation to COVID-related response and proportionality on these projects? I don't know. And maybe it's some aspect of this project that would be, safer. Is it a whole project? I don't know. This one gives me a little bit of heartburn,
I
but
know.
mostly because of what I don't know.
Okay,
It would have to have maybe some angle about COVID having affected investment and business opportunity, work. I mean, that it would have hindered and created a barrier, but I think you're right. I think this is a challenge on our ARPA guidelines now.
so let's just move on. Economic recovery, I assume, is fine. We've been doing that
Yeah.
under CARES.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last one is the Community Federal Reserve Bank
Right.
issue.
I actually have no idea what that is.
Isn't that
That-
159?
Communities.
It's not a 159?
No. I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, it's the working community challenges that it is not where it's not in this bill, and the money for it is not in this. It is
It's not in
Not-
the House version either? I
is
don't
it
know how we got onto this one.
because the
Maybe,
House,
maybe it was in the
House.
governor's,
it's in their
Governor-
memo.
in the governor's budget. Okay. This was the one where there were 8 applicants and 4 got approved for 1.9 million, and they came in and the department came in and asked for $3 million more for the communities that got rejected, and we decided we would give them 1.9, the same as the 4 communities that had got accepted. And the House has now come back and say they want 2.3. I don't know where it is.
Where is it? Because we discussed it in this committee and we decided to fund it to the same degree as the 4 communities that had been funded. And I'm trying to find it. It's not in this bill. Where is it?
There's $1.9 million in your budget to ACCD for Working Community Challenge grants.
That's it.
period.
That's it. What section is it? I can't.
But he
It's
said,
in your economic development section. It's in G302.
but it's not in, you're saying it's not in 159
It's
at
not
all.
in 159.
Okay.
Not in any bill I've ever worked on.
Okay. All right. All right. So that sums that up. As you can see, there's not that much difference here. So it's hard to have further discussions at this point because we haven't heard back from the
Well-
House on what they're thinking. And, so this is something that I think we need before we have discussions among ourselves. We need to know a little bit more about the starting point from them. I think it would be unfair to us to have those kinds of discussions here until we get some feedback from them.
Mr. Chair, I believe we need clarity on some of those emails from you that we're talking about in our discussions, that we're talking about 159 and not 157. I think you need to, that is actually,
Have I mixed them up?
yes,
Sorry.
yeah, you did. And it's
Okay.
sadly causing a bit of a challenge on the House side. So I have sent you a couple of emails saying, I believe you're talking about 159. If you could
Okay.
just, if you could.
I will go through my emails now and correct all that. It doesn't surprise me that I've confused the two.
I know,
But I think it should be pretty obvious,
I agree,
There's
but I'm
such
just,
different bills, but okay.
I'm
So
just
on
like-
157, we, just in the last few minutes, we have here,
general
Senator
yeah.
Clarkson and I have to go to another call at noon, and it's on 157, which is the home contractors bill. That bill is presently in Senate appropriations. I don't think they're meeting today. So it's our hope that it will be voted out of that committee without any changes. Tomorrow, there's only $200,000 in that bill is it 200,000? I think.
Yes, it's 200,000.
$200,000 from special funds. I don't think it should give them much heartburn on that issue. And then we still have apparently the Matt Coda issue, and we're meeting with Matt Coda at noon and Lauren Hibbert to try and correct that. David, would you be able to join us on that call?
Sure.
Okay, we'll have, I don't know
I
who
will
set it up.
forward you the Zoom link.
Okay, fine. And we may need you to clarify that language we put in. We thought we had fixed this problem. He's saying we still haven't. And, it's a tension between letting people know who they're dealing with as a business contractor and the fact that people working for that business contractor, either through their own certification or supervision, don't need to be, we don't need to be assured any more than we already are on the safety element. So that's what we're going to try and work out and see if we can, if Matt Code is not understanding what we wrote, or whether we can either do an amendment or get some interpretation of this from Lauren Hibbert, how she would implement it. The other choice is we have next session to tweak this a little bit, as people don't have to be registered by when, David? April 1st is the due date for registrations, I think.
Next year
Next year, right? Right.
or the 23.
I think it's something like, there's some early bird specials where you can register sooner, but they don't have to register until I think the spring. So if we need to clear it up in next year, we can make a commitment to try and do that. Okay, so we will see folks at 6:30. Keep an eye on your email. And
Is Amy able to do that? I don't know how to take it live or anything, but I can set up the Zoom. I just don't know how to do the live bit.
I
What
forgot.
time are we talking?
6:30, Amy, could you,
This evening?
yes, can you help us, or can somebody
Sure.
help?
Yep.
Okay.
If I can't, I can definitely get someone that can.
Okay, so
Great.
let's send a notice out to the committee with the Zoom link for 6:30. And why don't we make it 6:30 to 7:30 at this point, and we'll see where things move along during the day.
And
But wait a minute, that's 6:30 this evening, correct? And that's
Right.
assuming that the conference committee on H360 ends.
Right.
you
And
will hopefully text us and be in touch with us.
All right, thanks.
thank you. Okay,
Matt, okay.
okay, thank you.